Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I'm excited to be with you all on today. We've been having some great conversations over the past few months, and we're going to continue. We have a very interesting show today that I'm excited. So why don't we start by bringing all of my people in today? Where my people at? Let's bring in Mark Bassett. Mark, the co-host here. How you doing, Mark?
Wow, you went out of order. Usually we go with John. I'm doing great.
I know.
Hey now.
So good to Mark. How you been, buddy?
I'm doing great. I had my snowblower out this morning for the first time in quite a while. So.
And hey, we have been doing pretty good it relates for Michigan.
Yes,
I couldn't complain about the little stuff we got today. We do live in Michigan, and it's been much worse in times. It is still just the end of January. We still have February and March to get through.
Even April and sometimes May. So
isn't Groundhog's Day coming up pretty soon?
It is. Yeah, here in the next few weeks, I think.
All right. Well, we might as well bring this other young guy, the guy who's fresh off the boat, Jonathan, Baby J. Come on in, Jonathan.
Hello.
Babyface Jonathan. That's going to be your criminal mind name.
He is a baby.
Yeah, boss.
He looks all clean. But so Groundhog's Day. When is Groundhog's Day, John?
I have no idea.
I'll look it up.
It's coming up soon.
Coming up.
And so the story is that if the groundhog sees the show, that it's 6 more weeks of summer,
something like that,
or winter.
Yeah.
It's going to be February 2nd.
Okay, so it's
next week.
Next week, it's coming up.
The day after the show.
We're gonna know if it's gonna be continued sunshine like we've been. This is the thing that gets me. We're going to know if we're going to have more winter or summer, or summer's coming sooner, or whatever that is, spring. We don't have a spring, so we go from winter to
summer here in Michigan.
But the thing that gets me about Michigan, and I'm so glad we have a doctor that's going to be in the house.
Wait a minute, I'm a doctor. You keep forgetting that.
You are a doctor. Oh, my God. I'm like, no, you're not a doctor.
I don't get the respect I deserve around here.
I was getting ready to say, you're not a doctor. You're Mark. You're not a doctor, you're Mark. But for those of you who are listening, we want to thank you for those who are listening in on WSGW 100.5 FM and 790 AM here in the Michigan Bay region. No, I got that right. I always want to say Saginaw Bay region, the Michigan Bay region. And then also for those who are listening on WJOL in Joliet, Illinois, 1340 AM. We certainly welcome you to the conversation on today. Some of the thing that I was going to say, my biggest issue with winter in Michigan, it's not even the cold, it's not even the snow, it's the fact that we never see the sun. And it drives me bananas. And so like the one day I think we saw the sun for like 3 hours, and I was so excited. I was like, hey, the sun's out, and then it was gone again.
You need to buy one of those lamps that put the we've talked about this before. I call it, Mary's got one, I call it the magic lamp.
We talked about it because
we can ask Travis about it when he jumps on.
Yeah, you were saying that Jonathan needed one of those things. He's getting a little patient. But hey, you know how we do. We're going to bring in our guest today, and you guys behave. Is Travis Pashak, I think it is. Am I pronouncing it correct? Dr. Travis
Pashak, I believe.
Pashak.
Yeah.
Dr. Travis.
He can correct us if that's not correct.
He can correct us if we're not. You're absolutely, if we're not correct. Associate Professor of Psychology, clinical psychologist, professor at SVSU. He's teaching classes in psychology out there. So good to have you. Could you please, first of all, correct us on your name?
Mark got it right, actually. So it's Pashak, like a chic razor, I guess. Yeah.
Hey, leave it to the white guy to get it right?
You know the white names.
All those consonants and vowels, okay, here we go. But it's great to have you, Doctor. You were given to us. You were actually referred to us. And I'm excited to have you here today. So what are you doing out there in the city or in the, I was going to say city of Saginaw Valley, but it is Saginaw Valley University.
He's a professor, and then he has a private practice as well, I believe.
Okay. Mark knows what you've been doing, but why don't you share with us, what exactly do you do?
Yeah. And thanks for having me. I'm excited about this. Like Mark said, I'm a clinical psychologist. The bulk of what I do on an average week is teaching classes here at SVSU. But I also have a small private practice out in Midland where I see clients for psychotherapy, and I do a little bit of research, publishing, giving talks at conferences, that kind of stuff too. But by and large, I teach college classes.
What do you do your research in?
Depressing, morbid things. But
that's always interesting. There's a lot of shows on TV about that. So
yeah, I'm especially interested in what are called existential concerns and how those are related to mental health. So things like how people handle death anxiety, how they handle, the sense of maybe meaninglessness or like a lack of structure in life. I'm fascinated by that sort of stuff.
No, like a major life event, like a loss of a spouse or losing, would those be included in that? Any sort of major event in a life that causes something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be really big things that have a lot of gravity and that really shake up someone's experience. It could also be, the accumulation of small, a growing sense that you're not living authentically or that something isn't lining up. Yeah, both things for sure.
I think it's going to be interesting. So I can't wait to really dive into that conversation. Well, those of you who are listening, if you've listened more than one time here, you know that we talk about what's hot off the press, and we got some interesting topics. And doctor, we want you to feel free to be a part of this. Just beware, there may be shenanigans, but we try to keep it. We try to keep it as cerebral as possible.
And he's got a professional reputation to maintain. So.
Absolutely. So we want you to. We love the bow tie. We love the look, and we're never going to do anything to tarnish your reputation. As a matter of fact,
talking to students, it's not that serious. Don't worry.
I want to talk about this because I think it's really interesting, and I don't know if you guys have heard about the Tyree Nichols situation, the young man in Memphis, 29 years old, that had an altercation with police officers, 5 officers in it, and there seems to be there's some EMS, maybe fire workers, what do you call it? Firemen? Firefighters. There you go. That's what we call them.
Yeah.
Firefighters that are part of this whole debacle. But they brutally beat this guy, and in the terms of his mother, they beat him like a piñata. And it was just, it is the most heinous thing that we've ever seen. As a matter of fact, I was listening to the police chief down in Memphis, and she said it was heinous, reckless, and inhumane. And what is interesting and what's different about this particular story than a lot of these other stories that we talk about is the fact that this African-American man was brutally beat by 5 African-American police officers.
Now the story that I saw had a little bit different details there. It was that some of these police officers were bystanders and failed to intervene.
Yes. There you go. Now let us allegedly, right? Yeah. So let's put those alleged. So yeah, so some of the charges are the fact that some did not intervene. There was a number of I think there were 3 or 4 charges. You have a right to do something, one of those things. But the interesting thing is we have tables turned to some degree, and we have 5 African-American police officers that this is kind of like George Floyd all over again, it seems, that are a part of this scheme. There is no Mark Chauvin. But I do want to name the names of these officers because whenever this happens, I think we should just say their names. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III, Desmond Mills Jr. and Justin Smith were the names of the 5 officers. But what's interesting is that this chief did not play any games. Swiftly, I'm assuming that whatever was on those body cams was so damaging that she's like, there's no way in the world this is going to fly. And she got rid of them right away, which I always think is if you have the evidence, it's the best thing to do, to just make it swift and get it over with. But what do you guys think in terms of must have been on these? First of all, who if you're going to do this in your police officer, what would you do? Wouldn't you? We need to turn off the body cam here.
I think that's an issue. I mean, once you start turning off a body cam, I think that's probably
we're having malfunctions over here.
That's probably a big issue as well. I mean, I think it gets back to, and we've had this discussion before, I think, and this is not, I'm sure, the first or only time something like this has happened. It's, is it a race thing? Is it a cultural thing? Is it some combination of both? I mean, clearly, black on black crime is not a race thing. It's a cultural thing.
That is a misnomer, first of all, Mark. Let's get this together.
Right.
Okay. Black on black crime it's not a real thing. It's you kill who, or you hurt, or you.
Sure, but if a white policeman were to do that,
we'll call it white. I'm going to start calling it white on white crime.
There's a lot of it. Yeah.
It happens all the time.
But I think that often gets framed in terms of race. That they must be racist.
Absolutely.
And clearly, well, not clearly. That's not true.
The doctor wants to say something.
Okay,
Mark.
Go ahead.
He wants to make a point. He's like, you guys are bad. Go ahead.
No. So there's a couple of things happening here. One is when something horrible happens and it involves Black folks, there's a knee-jerk reaction to frame it around race. But if something horrible happens around white folks, the majority culture doesn't even see the race of the event, right? So that's why people aren't using this term white on white crime. When the reality, you look at the statistics, most violence occurs within same race relations.
Absolutely.
So that doesn't actually, the other thing I was going to point out, which is kind of fascinating, is just because the police officers were Black folks, to be clear, I wasn't actually following this issue, so I don't know exactly what happened. But just because the officers are Black folks doesn't necessarily mean that internalized racism wasn't a part of what motivated them to see this individual in a certain threatening, looming light. Being a person of color doesn't make one immune from having, the society's racist intentions.
I forget the article.
Yeah, you've been all my life.
I read an article, and it was a very famous, well-to-do Black woman, and she was traveling with her son, and her son was obviously very young, and I think they were sitting in first class in a plane, and a Black man walked on, and her son was actually afraid, like, is something going to happen because this is a Black man. Where's
she raising her kid at?
No, well, that
in
to
Iceland.
Her, no, but that to her, they were probably living in a predominantly white.
I got you.
Upper middle.
That
upper
happens.
class.
We sometimes.
And so, his
track.
experience of like most Black America was probably, poor neighborhoods, etc. It's kind of just to reinforce Dr. Paschik's point of like, no race is immune to preconceived notions, even of their own race.
No, yeah. I think if you've ever seen, and this is really going way back, and I'm sure that you guys have never seen this for sure. But if there is perhaps someone that's listening, you've ever seen the movie Boys in the Hood.
I've seen it.
You've seen?
I have.
Mark, you my dude, man. But in Boys in the Hood, there's a scene where Trey, who is one of the leads, played by Cuba Gooding, is pulled over and harassed by a Black and I think a white officer, but it was really the Black officer that was, and it's some examples of
training day,
that internalization. I call it self-hate, but I mean, we become products of the environments that we're in. So I think that's a huge.
The point I was trying to go is ultimately, I think one of the bigger issues is the culture within certain portions of the police population of abuse of power, abuse of authority.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, because my issue, it was not about race.
Yeah.
My issue was really about our policing culture and the fact that, we always say there's one or two bad apples. And I think for the most part, I think our men in the blue, I'm not a defund the police person at all. But I think that there is definitely a need for us to do some training and some rehabilitation and some really investigating on why do we, and I think it's really just the humans element. I don't know, Doc, you let me know that when we're given power and authority over or in particular situations, we sometimes kind of lose ourselves in the process. What are your thoughts?
Too many to spit out cleanly. Yeah. I mean, the way you just framed that, it's like it has echoes of, Zimbardo's prison study where they had the folks anonymized into either the guard role or the prisoner role, and they were treated horrifically. That whole thing kind of fell apart because it came out later that he falsified some of the results and he coached people to act in certain ways. But the core message, I think, is still true, that when you become not your individual self, but rather just a representative of the badge or just a representative of something else, it kind of gives people license to act more harshly, with more callous and less connection to the other humans. And I thought Mark was making a great point about the intersectional nature of these things. It's not just race, it's also social class. So the guy getting on the plane, if he was in a suit, what would that teen have thought of him versus if he's walking in a hoodie? And how does that intersect with your racial identity? Like, all that stuff is important.
I think Kobe Bryant, before he passed away, he made a point of the fact that he's treated a lot different when he's on the court and he's making shots and he's crazy. He's the greatest person, everyone's icon, but yet he leaves the court and he's at home or chilling in the community. He puts on a pair of sweats and a hoodie. All of a sudden he's treated or, instigated or engaged as a thug until they find out who he is. Yep. So it's an interesting thing. But anyways, these officers, this is going on right now. These officers have been fired. Now, what is interesting, and this is why I always tell people that when you have interactions with police officers, and this happened to me, guys, I had an interaction with a police officer, and I remember what my attorney friend was telling me. He was like, listen, when you're on the street, the time to to fight back with your words or to say what you feel, that is not the time. Police officers are in control on the street. So, live another day, but make sure that you file a report. And so I did this. I filed a report, and I was like, this guy was a little bit, out of control. His language, his tone. And you know me, I'm not one who's lets anybody talk to me any kind of crazy, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to follow the rules. But the Saginaw Township Police, and I said, this is the new guy. I can't remember what his name is, the new guy. Have you met him yet, John? But anyways, he called me back the next day, and he was like, listen, Kareem, we watched the body cam and the video of your stop from both vehicle and the body cam. And, there were some things that were not consistent with how we would like to train his community service, or his, not community service, what do you call it? His public service and his customer service. That's what it was. We're really off. And so we're going to really sit down with him, review this. And they took this seriously. And I thought it was important. And now
do you think you got that kind of service because of who you are?
No, it's not.
I believe that to be the case.
So now I don't have my hood card. They took my black card. Come on, Mark. Come on. It was because, I keep it gully, Mark. You know how I do it. No, but right. I think it was just because, honestly, I was super polite. I tried it. And I don't know if he was having a bad day, but I appreciated the fact that I was heard. And the situation was taken care of. So when I look at this and I see that there was a previous charge filed against this guy in 2016, inmate at a penal farm said that he was abused and blacked out, until he blacked out by this guy. I thought it was quite interesting. But I want to turn the corner. We're going to go to this next story. We talked about that forever. Yeah. But this next one, Mark, I'm going to let you lead this one in because I think this is super interesting.
Well, yeah, my wife's really into this. I'm not. And that's kind of Joe Mangan. I can never get his name right. The one married to Sofia Varga. Joe Manganiello.
Manganiello, something like that. Yeah,
he did one of these, they have that TV show where they
Finding Our Roots,
where they go back and he found out, he thought he was, I think pure blood Italian from, the New York area. Turns out he's anything but. He's a family of
he's
slaves.
A brother.
Yeah, he's 7% came of his body or of his DNA came from slaves. And it's a totally different kind of historic background of heritage than he thought he was. And that one of his great grandfathers was a black man who married a white woman in the late 1800s when it was illegal. And so it gave him a whole new appreciation of who he was as a person.
But you know what? I watched this guy as far as back. He was in a show called True Blood. And when he came in, he had swagger. I said, there's something about
Big
this
guy.
dude. I just knew it. So he's got swagger. But it was interesting. And it brings to me, if you find out these things, there is no pure race, that exists here on the planet. But when you find out these things, this is a huge find for him. Does this change how you view things in yourself and the world around?
Yeah, for him, he clearly, at least that's what he articulated, that it really fundamentally changed who he thought he was as a person. I think he took pride in the family that he came from, like real survivors.
He thought he was Armenian, right?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, Armenian. Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, for me, to be honest with you, my wife's really into this as well. She does all her genealogy. We've done this DNA testing. She's always looking at it. I don't really care. Like if I found out I was 7% black, I really wouldn't care.
What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and found out?
I would be like, I don't care. I mean, because ultimately I am who I am. And just because like a distant relative 3 generations before was a slave, that doesn't change who I am today. And it's kind of like it has no impact on me. And so I did find out I'm like 1% Native American, but it's like, so what? Okay, great. My wife, though, it's a big deal. Clearly to Joe, it was a big deal. Sounds like to you, it would be very important.
It would be a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised that there are European descendants that are a part of my heritage. That is, not without surprise.
I wonder if it was Thomas Jefferson. No.
This guy. But I think it's interesting. What about you, Jonathan? If you woke up tomorrow and found out you were a black man, what would you do?
I don't know. We had prefaced this, and I was kind of thinking about it before the show. And at first, I took up like, no, I'm who I am.
Right.
The same thing as Mark. But then I'm like, I can't really say how I would think, because I don't identify very much with the past. I don't think like, oh, 6 generations ago,
Right.
this or that or that or this. I think that it's fun to kind of delve in, and part of my family's mythos, I'll say, I haven't found proof to it, but part of it is we supposedly had an ancestor on the Mayflower, and that's just kind of a cool little thing to throw around sometimes, but it's not a core part of who I am.
You know what else on the Mayflower, don't you, Jonathan?
What?
If your ancestors were on the Mayflower, you know what else was on the Mayflower, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just to put it in context. But this is interesting. To me, this is interesting. I love this show, Finding Your Roots with was it Lewis Gates Jr., William Henry Gates. Is that what his name is? What's his name?
That was I don't know.
Lewis
I don't watch
Henry
the show.
Gates. That's his
Okay.
name, Lewis Henry Gates. But no, I didn't watch the show either. But I told you, remember I told you guys the story about how I found out that my forefather, my fifth great grandfather, as his fifth great grandfather, was sold into slavery from Maryland to Maringouin, which is where I consider our family coming from, Maringouin, Louisiana, by Jesuit priests to keep Georgetown open. And it was on this show that my cousin Ipatha was on here, and this is how we found out that story. And the work that they do is absolutely amazing. But I got to, I did an interview with someone named Joe Madison, who's a big urban radio, urban community, Sirius satellite guy. And he actually is good friends with Lewis Henry Gates. We should get him on and talk about DNA and genealogy. I think would be very interesting. Doctor, what would happen tomorrow? You find out, hey, I'm 25% Congo. How does it change your life? And should we factor these things in as we can, make this formulation of who we are as people?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I mean, first, I guess I just want to say race is a social construct, and just kind of make sure that we're emphasizing that. If you go back far enough, we all have the same roots. So, like, what period in time is it that we're really emphasizing, and why? Like, why is it that 1,000 years ago is the point at which we're fascinated by? And it's like, oh, this is the separation. And but I mean, to be fair, my family had sort of a similar thing happen. Our narrative lore is that we're all Polish. I took 2 years of Polish in college, trying to get more in touch with my roots and the language and everything. And then my wife and I do the what is it, 21 and Me, or one of the saliva test things, and it comes back and says I like negligent percent of that part of Europe. It's more I'm closer to being like English and Welsh. And so we're scratching our heads, and it's like I'm thinking about my grandma's story about her father immigrating to Bay City and standing on a street corner learning English, just listening to the passersby. And it's like that story's probably true, but it doesn't hold up in the genetics in the way that we expected. I don't know what we're supposed to make of that. Is it a privilege that I just don't feel extremely strongly tied to all that because I just get to be me? I don't know.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting. I have friends who are Czechoslovakian, and it is so important to them.
Yeah.
And I also think that I want to come back and I want to cover this really quick because there's an interesting piece of the story, because the reason that he thought that he was Armenian and German was because of stories like you just shared with us, only to find that not only was he not, Armenian and German, but there is a whole nother story of really dishonesty that we find lurking beneath the system. So I salute him for sharing, him and his family for sharing this. It happens all the time. Y'all have seen more.
They gave him the option not to do the story anymore because it was so much different than he thought.
But you see, Murray, you're not the baby father. We'll be back.
I love that show, man.
After this break. Sticks Day, don't go away. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. We have with us the usual suspect, the guys that are always here, John B., the producer, Mark Bassett, and we also have in the studio with us Dr. Travis Pashik. There we go.
And it's not that hard. Come on.
I just want to make sure that we get his name correctly.
I appreciate it.
I thank you, sir, and I appreciate you being here. You showing these white guys and giving them some real culture and some real flavor in this discussion. I appreciate you, my man. By the way, before I get to going back to where we were, have you had the opportunity to meet Dr. Dawn Hinton?
Yeah, she's wonderful.
She is absolutely wonderful. And when you were saying some things earlier, I was like, yeah, I like
Has she
this
been
guy.
on the show? I can't remember.
She has been on this show
sat
before.
right here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
She was like, I don't think that I should be the one. I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
No, but she's an amazing friend, and I absolutely love her. But before we went to break, we were talking about Joe Manganiello, and we were talking about how the story of, why he thought that he was Armenian. And, it's funny how we have these lessons in history or these family anecdotes that we have. He finds out that that's not so true. The guy you thought was your grandfather isn't really your grandfather. Is that how I plagued out, or your father, or however that was?
Great grandfather,
fifth great grandfather, or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Wasn't really the man. You don't have that DNA, Manganiello, the DNA. And you think about your name. Could you find your name is not really your name? That's something that I think is a bit different. Like if something happening, what, Bowen, you really aren't a Bowen. What? Yeah. And so he finds out this entire story. So that's going to be something interesting to watch. It's going to be in this season 6. I think it's episode number 9 of Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates. That's the name. But we're going to turn the corner. For those of you who are listening to this banter that we've had going on here today, we're going to become a bit more academic in our standing here today. And we're going to talk a little bit about health and happiness and coping with stress. Since the doctor is in the other doctor is in the house. The real doctor is in the house.
I'm not a medical doctor.
No, but we
neither am I.
Pashik.
I
want to thank Dr. Pashik.
Just say Dr. Travis.
And in my head, I was going through this, and I'm Googling.
Travis is fine, yeah.
All right, Dr. Travis. Thank you, doctor. In the house with us. And Doc, I want to reference a video that you did because I thought it was really interesting, and I found myself listening to that video and just kind of trolling you online. You can find his information on his YouTube, Prof Pash, right? PROFPASH is his YouTube channel, and there is a plethora of great material out there. I'm like, he's not just a doctor, but he is really becoming quite a celebrity. You got a nice little followership you're building. It's growing. I'm looking at it. There's commercials on your content.
Wow,
that's a good thing.
That, man.
When you get commercials on your content, that's something good. But I
didn't know that actually. So
yeah, there is.
Money, it's not me.
You need a revenue stream, doctor. Come on now.
I'm an official YouTube creator, content creator. How I became that, I think I just have a whole bunch of videos, but you're on there and you're giving some good content. But one of those that really stuck me, and I said, this is what we want to talk with him about, because I think this is where many of our listeners are. You were talking about health and happiness and coping with stress. I want to first say, what led you, first of all, to go that direction and to share that information with your listeners?
Yeah, it's actually just a really practical thing. So most of the videos that I've created are supplements for the courses I'm teaching. And it's either because, well, during COVID, some of the stuff I was teaching had to be online. Other pieces and parts just, if based on the calendar of the semester, if I know that there's a day where I'm going to be away or something, I'll just create some content and put it there. And then that replaces the in-class lecture. There's a couple other little videos that I've done where it's just for the sake of talking about my research, but the vast majority of it is strictly for class, which makes it hilarious that I actually have so many people following me, because I'm thinking, I don't know why you're here. You're not taking the courses, but there's one particular video on psychological assessment. So, everything from IQ tests to the Rorschach and all that sort of stuff. It's got 24,000 views, something like that.
I told you. Yeah.
I don't know where you people are coming from that you're so fascinated by this, but hey, cool, welcome. But anyways, that's what most of the videos are for.
You got to make sure that you're paying attention to that, because there may be an opportunity for monetization off the content that you create. And I know that you're not in that space for profit, but if people are going to be coming there to consume what you put out there, I think, hey, it's yours, buddy. But I do want in your video, you began to give some very important clues or cues on how to determine if you're happy, how to search out happiness, how do you find happy, where do we get to happy street?
Oh, that's a big question. So I mean, I think if you're referencing that particular video, I kind of started with just talking about what exactly happiness is, right? So on the one hand, you could think about the short-term bursts of joy, excitement, pleasure. And those are nice and everything, but I think for most people, what you're actually searching for is something more along the lines of life satisfaction or some other construct like that.
Would
Where,
fulfillment be a word to use? Fulfillment or fulfillment?
yeah, fulfillment, meaning. The people are, you're trying to get something where even if you're in a bad mood for a day or two, even if you have a really rough week, that the big picture of your life, the narrative is something you're content with. So in terms of pursuing that, I think for a lot of people, it comes down to reflecting on your core values and trying to ask yourself, am I doing things with my life that actually add up to those things I care about?
It's interesting because I was thinking about the question as well. And as a parent, I'm a parent of 7. Sounds like Dr. Patrick's got 3 kids, and always the kind of the off the cuff answer of what you want for your kids. You want them to have happiness. But the more I've thought about it, and I saw this thing last week where it's really purpose, because I think if you have a purpose and you find your purpose, if you're pursuing that purpose, that provides a level of kind of fulfillment or satisfaction that, and I think that's what most people are actually looking for is, what's my purpose? How do I follow that? And am I actually making a difference in the world around me?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the harder parts of parenting, right? I mean, our gut response to a lot of things is I want to prevent pain for this person. I want to prevent boredom. I want to prevent any, short-term problems. I want them to experience short-term happiness, but in many ways that comes into conflict with helping them to seek longer term contentment. Let them be bored, let them think about stuff, let them be aimless for short periods. And mine are younger, so their problems aren't so big yet. But I mean, yeah, when it comes to teens and college students, when you're parenting young adults, they have to flounder, they have to explore, they got to figure out, what the heck am I doing with this life?
It's interesting because you gave when in your defining happiness that you're the core of who you are returns to a good place even when they're down moments. And John, I think that you'll be able to appreciate this being a PK. I was always taught as a kid growing up, my grandfather being a pastor as well, that there is a difference between joy and happiness. And many people seek happiness, which, as you were saying, is temporal. It's short-lived. But joy is really the place where, regardless of the circumstances around you, there is an inner sense of being that is fulfilling, that allows you to overcome the momentary sadness in your life. And so that's kind of in essence what you're saying. As we look at, are you happy? Are you having more positive days than you are these negative days? What should we do when we begin to feel as though we're having maybe a few more negative days than we're having positive days?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm biased, of course, because I do psychotherapy, but I think that's, for many people, part of a good answer. If you're having too many of these days where the mood feels off, you're anxious, you're angry, you're distressed, you're kind of procrastinating, or you're avoiding what you need to do, therapy or counseling, there's many different professional titles for people that would provide this service. Going in and talking to someone you trust, having them ask questions that get you to open up, to build a relationship with them, and to explore, what's missing in life, or why aren't these gears turning smoothly. I think that can be good for a lot of people. I guess I'm also sort of like hesitating as I'm saying some of this too, though, because I feel like I'm centering the personality and like the psychological part of this, when really it's a whole biological, psychological, and sociocultural spectrum of stuff that's all relevant. Part of being happy is living in a place where you're not going through a famine or you're not at war. Part of being happy is you're just lucky enough to inherit the genetics of people that are relatively even keel most of the time. So I think I would be shortchanging the truth if I just said, if you're not happy, go to therapy, which benefits my field and my career. But there's lots of ways to answer that for people.
I mean, are you guys happy? Are you happy, Mark?
Well, I would say is to the doctor's point, happiness is fleeting, to your point as well. Do I feel like I am fulfilled? I'm in a major life transition, as you know, is from retirement. I'm in a journey. Generally speaking, I'm happy or fulfilled, or I'm trying to fine tune what my purpose really is. I think, as you know, I was retired to work on my relationship with my wife, my kids, God, and see if I could find a way to make a bigger impact in the community rather than just being the CEO of a company. And I think I've got mixed feelings of where I'm at in that journey. Some things I'm further along than others, but I'm in that transition stage. Generally speaking, I'm happy, I guess. It's a long answer, but
I am blown away, Mark, though, at how you embrace this change. It's amazing to me just watching. Like, I was like, he's gonna be neurotic. There's no way he's gonna make it. And you just kind of like, hey.
Well, that's one of the things I'm proud of. And to Dr. Paschik's point, I've been very open about this. I've been seeing a therapist since 2016, I believe. And that's who recommended Travis to me. And while I probably need it much less today than I did then, I still see that person because it's invaluable for me anyway, to be able to have someone I can speak to without any fears of, I'm in a really close, it's not my wife, it's not a close personal friend, so I can be really transparent. That being said, it is a very intimate relationship in a sense with your counselor or therapist. And he's helped me through this transition. And I actually, because you see how many people actually die within a couple of years of retirement, it's a crazy number.
Wow.
How I do feel like I've handled that transition fairly well.
So Jonathan, are you happy?
I had this conversation fairly recently, actually, and pretty much everybody in my family started just asking each other that question last month. We just sat down and we asked each other that question.
Are you happy? You happy?
Yeah, really. And we had a really deep discussion about it. And I think my answer to that is I don't like the word content, because that puts in my mind that I'm happy right where I am. I'm content with my life. I feel fulfilled.
You have bigger aspirations.
Exactly. But I still have those aspirations. I feel that I am my most happy when I am barely treading water and I'm learning something new and I can just barely keep up. And the second that I kind of start to find my footing, I get bored.
You're in a growth phase. You're a young guy. You have high aspirations and you want to constantly stretch and grow yourself, which is great.
I don't understand. Honestly, I don't understand. And it may sound crazy. I don't really understand. Am I happy? I'm not sad, but am I happy? I mean, I feel like life is good. I feel like I'm happy. I don't, and I use that term, and I use that term not really understanding what it means to me. Like, I don't have like, I guess there are some peaks that I have in life, but I think that I'm kind of always right here.
You're a much more of a stable person. What would you say what kind of questions would you ask someone like Kareem?
Yeah,
Doctor,
go ahead. Fire away, Doc.
If you were you're having this discussion,
because Black people don't go to therapy. Yeah. I mean, we're just breaking the ice on doing this therapy thing. We're no longer crazy if we go talk to somebody. So
if you were having a session with Kareem, what would you ask?
What would you ask me?
Oh man, honestly, I was going to say I'm actually really impressed with all three of you with the sort of generous honesty that you've given in your answers just now. I mean, being clear about, I have mixed feelings, and retirement makes me think like, gosh, everybody who retires dies in like 9 months. What the heck is happening to me? Is this really where I am in life? And Kareem, you're kind of saying like happiness isn't this really obvious burstful thing that happens to me all the time. It's more just that like I'm doing my thing and I'm mostly like pretty satisfied. Happiness to you is the absence of really evident problems. I think that's fine.
Ooh, that was deep. Can I write that down and use it sometime? Hey, I'm also
he is a Michigan man, by the way.
I'm a
He
Michigan.
didn't go to state. He went to Michigan.
I know. Can any good thing come out of Michigan? But I'm also a pastor. So what you just said, I think that'll sound good really in a sermon. So I'm gonna have to use that sometime. That was really good.
Hurry up and trademark that.
By the way, you made the point that, well, okay, for one thing, like in what ways do happiness and therapy intersect? And, Mark, it's so cool that you're open about your therapy journey and that you've been doing this for a long time and how useful it's been to you. I don't think the goal of therapy is necessarily like, let's get you happy all the time, because often it's like, hey, let's have you do things that are scary. Hey, let's have you do things that cause conflict but are truer to yourself. Hey, let's have you do things where you're examining some of the most painful parts of your past, but you're making sense of it, you're organizing it. So to sort of equate like the therapy journey with just being a short-lived happiness-seeking endeavor, I don't think that's quite right. Not to say that that's what you meant by it. No. And then there's also, the whole show is about race relations, right? So I was kind of thinking about that coming into this episode, and you just pointed out, there is this discrepancy in terms of who goes and seeks therapy, and in particular, Black men often don't feel comfortable doing it.
Why is that?
There are stereotypes that say you shouldn't need it. You should instead go to your pastor, or you should pray harder. There are stereotypes that say this makes you weak. And I don't know, if I have the ear of mid-Michigan for even half a second, I just want to be like, hey guys, it's okay. This does not make you weak. This is good for you. This is a part of healthcare.
In my generation, you're quite a bit younger than I am, doctor, 20, 30 years. It was really a stigma to say I got to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Like if I was in my 20s or 30s, it's much less today, at least in the white community. I think in the Black community, there's still that stigma. I
still remember, like I vividly remember having conversations. We would see things on TV, and some woman would go or a man would go, and they would talk to the psychiatrist. We were like, the white people problems. Like, Black people ain't doing that. Like, you're gonna pray about it and you're just gonna keep it moving. But the reality of it is, I do have some family members that have gone. And, so our understanding of it is different. But I'll tell you, we spend more time talking to pastors and religious entities, religious officials, than we ever would to a doctor, psychologist, psychotherapist, or any of those things. And I think that is something that is a very big, I think it's something that is a very big part of our community, that we think that the answer to your issue lies in your ability to trust and have faith in God's word, versus you just needing someone to just kind of help you to talk through and listen through, work through those issues. So that's interesting that you brought that up, doctor, because I think I see that.
The reason I went was I was struggling a lot with a really negative self-image. And I had all these really troubling phrases and kind of imagery about myself. And, through my journey, it was really learning to become much more balanced about who I was, and not being, so no matter what I did, I was a failure. I was a bad husband. I was a bad father. I was a bad friend. I was one of the top leaders in Dow, but it was a failure professionally. It was just crazy.
See, this is the guy. Okay. This is how we became friends, because like how I view myself, I don't know. You may need to sit me in a chair and have another conversation. I don't I like me. Like, I really and genuinely like who I am. And so when I meet Mark is we are very alike in the fact that we're very direct in our communication. We're compassionate about some things, but how he sees himself is so different than what I see when I communicate with it's. And so it blows me away when he shares those things, because that's not the person that I see that I communicate with, or that I call friend. Yeah. So doctor, what do we do? How do we fix him?
Well, it sounds like Mark's doing a pretty wonderful job working on himself. to be able to say these are the ways in which I hurt and I'm working on it and I'm growing. I mean, I think that's brave. I think that's awesome. The Kareem, the fact that you can say like, I like myself, you possess a happy, healthy level of narcissism, and that's a good thing. And careful, when I say narcissism, I'm not diagnosing. I'm not.
Doctor, you got to watch what you're saying here, because you're proving a whole bunch of people right now. Oh, we got to delete this. Stop.
No. Like everything is a spectrum, right? I mean, so sure, on the real extreme cases, you've got cult leaders and stuff. But as with anything, it's like you're in the happy functional zone where it's comfortable, and I believe in myself. I like myself. If me was another person, I would be friends with that person. I mean, that's good. That's what most of us should aspire to.
Well, yeah. Okay, Doc. This show has taken a turn that is. There are a couple of things that I'm thankful for today. I'm thankful that some people that are normally in the stream were not available and are tied up. I'm so glad the Mother Walker, who happens to be my mom, is not in the stream. Because
now I know two narcissists: Donald Trump and Kareem. No.
That's okay. I'm not stretching the category that far. That's
okay. I think you need to explain what
self-love. He means you have the appropriate amount of self-love versus me, who basically my thing was like, no one really likes me. No one really finds me interesting. You have the appropriate level of self-love and self-realization of who you are and the strengths you've got.
And Mark, I don't understand. You know what's funny about him, and since we're talking about this, and not to take your job, Doc, because I never could, but people actually like him. Like when he goes to places and he's talking with people, people are intrigued by who he is, what he says.
Yeah, and I don't believe that anymore. Like I've gotten through that. That's 5-6 years ago.
Okay.
That's what I believed. Like no one really likes me. No one really finds me interesting. They want to be around me because I help them. I'm a lot of fun to work with. I develop them. But if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't like me.
Doc, we got about 2 minutes. I want to give you, I'll give you 2 minutes really to just give us some things that we need to take, some indicators that we may need to do some work on ourselves if we're not in a place that we're feeling,
and then maybe where they
narcissistic.
Can go. Yeah.
Help us.
Oh man. Okay. I mean, I think you've done a nice job already of just kind of laying the groundwork of like, what does it mean to pursue happiness? What does it mean to pursue stability? And if people are really feeling like, okay, that's not where I am, maybe they have an inner monologue that sounds like where Mark was a few years back, where it's, I can't stand this person. I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. I'm no good at anything. I'm a piece of garbage. Take those things seriously as an indicator that maybe just like any other form of health, if you kept saying, man, my knee hurts, you'd go and have it looked at. Go and have your mind looked at. There's people get worried that it's this enormous commitment, that there's permanence to being diagnosed, and that is going to live on some chart forever and come to haunt you. That's not what therapists are here for. We're not here to brainwash. We're not here to strip away what makes you unique and interesting. It's a sounding board. It's a space to try and figure out what are these internal conflicts that I'm wrestling with, and could I bring some peace to them? And it's one of many answers to how people can get better. I don't think that you have to pick one or the other when it comes to, say, pastoral care. I don't think that you have to pick one or the other when it comes to like, I'm going to get some of my aggression out at the gym. Try a variety of things and see what seems to click for you, what seems to help. Obviously, I believe in therapy. And in terms of where to get it, lots of places, Google. I mean, we're all over the place. If you're looking for a psychologist in particular, the APA has a psychologist locator website that you can plug in by zip code and specialty. Lots of options.
Well, Dr. Pashik, we certainly thank you for your time and attention. And for those of you out there, an hour goes by so fast. Thank you for your attention and your listenership. This is Kareem, Mark, and John signing off. God bless you all. Grace and peace.